Okay, so what do you use for carb sources then? If you're not a pasta fan, where do you get you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do have it sometimes, but just not very often. I'll use mostly kind of rice, some potatoes, so that's kind of starches and other vegetables. And so I use the supplement bars now and then. I'm probably having, I probably have one a day almost sometimes, but or one every other day on busy days, that kind of thing. And the recovery drinks as well to help make sure I'm getting that extra calories that I need after the hard workouts, which will be about 2 or 3 times a week. I'm using those. So.
Okay, do you pay much attention to sort of calorie counting, or are you just kind of eat as when you feel?
I don't really. No, I sort of have done at certain times, but I found obviously I've kind of got to know what sort of portion sizes and things that I need, and without knowing the actual calorie content of everything, I've got a rough idea of what I need in my body, and I keep a measure of kind of my weight for racing purposes, and that's and just out of interest as well. So it stays fairly constant, and to be honest, sometimes the problem is there's not so much overeating, but making sure when you're in heavy training that you're getting enough in the body, and if you're eating a healthy option as opposed to a processed food, that can involve eating quite a lot, to be honest. So
Okay.
the plus side.
Yeah, right. What about cheating then? I mean, we all have a cheat meal every now and then. Do you use that as a kind of a reward for yourself and to keep you motivated, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say to keep motivated. I think just as a reward now and then, it's always nice. I've got a bit of a sweet tooth, so I think I probably regularly have a little pudding after my evening meal. That'll be my kind of I don't know, my perk or my downside, however you want to look at it. But certainly hasn't done me too much harm.
What's your body fat at the moment?
My body fat. Well, I haven't actually done it as a percentage. I was in the lab the other week at the Loughborough University and measured it at 29 millimeters on the 8-side test. So I think that probably equates on some of the tables to around about 5%. But don't quote me on that.
Right, now obviously you come from my home island of Guernsey, which despite being very small still produces quite a lot of top athletes and sportsmen like yourself, Dale Garland, Andy Prio, to name a few. The island's got great facilities for its size, but I know you guys go away a lot to train. Like you just said, you've been up to Loughborough Uni to kind of get that extra edge. Where do you tend to go and why? Do you ever go abroad at all?
Yeah, I went to Portugal in April for a couple of weeks. No choice for that was mainly because the training group that I was going with were going there. So, and that it's a good option that time of year. It's a bit warmer than the UK. There's no time difference at that time of year, and it's relatively cheap in terms of accommodation and so forth. So we use that as an option. It's not so much more for the climate, but more for just to get away from your normal environment. So you've got less distractions and more time to focus on training and that kind of thing. I have gone to altitude before, or I haven't done that on a regular basis. I went to South Africa previous year during the winter for a couple of weeks, and a place called Potchefstroom, which is about an hour and a half drive from Johannesburg, and that was at a slight elevation to get the training effects of that. But that's something I'll maybe look to use, not necessarily that location, but to look to use altitude again as a training camp in forthcoming training camps and seasons.
And what sort of effects does that have in terms of your results doing the altitude training?
Well, I've only done it once, so I guess it's inconclusive. I think the time that I used it, I perhaps overcooked the training a little bit on the camp anyhow. So I came back fit, but I didn't see any massive changes. But the elevation wasn't particularly high at the time, actually. So I haven't tried higher, or the recommended sort of altitude of most people. When you think about, people are thinking of sort of places in Kenya, for example, where a lot of the Kenyan athletes train, which is 1,800 metres to 2,000 metres. The altitude that I was at in South Africa was only 1,300 to 1,400 metres. So, inconclusive, but as the fact that it makes the body work a bit harder, I think, as a way of progressing your training is certainly something I want to look at and use a bit more of.
So, what exactly is the purpose of it normally? Why do people go to altitude?
Yeah, basically, because there's less oxygen available to you. I mean, basically the air pressure is different, and you don't get as much oxygen into the blood and into the lungs and so forth. So what happens is the idea is that the body then has to cope with that lesser supply. So some of the suggested physiological changes is that you produce kind of more red blood cells to compensate for that. So you get a better kind of oxygen carrying capacity. Some have that different stimulus onto the body to improve your aerobic capacity, I guess.
Okay. Right, now I'm getting more and more into the psychology of what keeps people training hard, for my own training, for my own clients. What sort of methods do you use to keep yourself motivated? What kind of self-talk do you use in training to sort of get through the pain and stay focused?
I guess I kind of break things down a little bit when you're doing like an interval workout, which is pretty intense, pretty hardcore. You're gonna need to stay focused and make sure that you're just taking each step as it comes. So I'll kind of break down interval sessions. Obviously, intervals are a form of breaking down training anyway. But for example, if I'm doing lots of repeats of say 400 meters, like 16 or 20 of them, rather than think about how many I've got to do, which obviously can be a bit daunting when you get to your first two and you're already working hard, is that I break down each effort. So I don't focus on the outcome. I focus on the process of what I'm doing. So that might mean certain parts of the rep I'm focusing on my running form, or running relaxed, or doing a certain type of thing with my action, or my breathing, or something like that, and do that on each part of the rep, and then do that each time. So I get into a routine of doing that, and before I know it, half the session's done, or I'm near the end. So it helps to kind of tick it by along nicely and stay focused on the task in hand.
Okay, just getting back to that then, you say about your 400 repeats. That sounds quite a lot to do between 16 and 20. Is that a kind of typical session, or what kind of rest do you use in between that?
Yeah, I mean, for example, sort of regular session I've done over the years might be, say, 16 400s. Or sometimes I'll break that into sets, but which might be, say, 3 sets of 5 and I'll do 15, or it might be 2 sets of 8, or it might be 16 straight through. But I'm using something like, depending on the intensity I'm working at, so I might be anywhere between 30 seconds and a minute recovery, of sort of light to fairly stationary recovery, working at an intensity that's similar to about sort of 3k, 5k pace, racing pace that is. So I guess it's kind of like a kind of speed endurance form for a distance runner, operating at those kind of distances.
Okay, I think that's quite important really, because I think some people, when they think, right, I'm going for 400 metre intervals, they're going flat out as fast as they can. They wonder why they can't do more than kind of 3 or 4. So that's obviously a key point.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, for example, a typical 5k, 10k, a 5k workout, say, might be 16 400s or 45 seconds, but you start out 5k pace, not flat out. So, if you start out flat out, you're going to actually get a different training stimulus, and you're not going to finish the session. Either not finish the session, or you're certainly not going to finish the session running the same time as you did at the end, you did at the start. So the consistency of the session will drop off and peter out